Okay, today we're going to talk about another friend of Ghislaine Maxwell's, but unlike the last friend of Ghislaine's that we talked about, Carol Radziwill, this friend, Christina Oxenberg, handled the entire scandal surrounding her friend Ghislaine completely differently. She chose transparency over defensiveness. There's so much lore to Christina Oxenberg. I'm going to give it to you in a nutshell as best as I can. So Christina Oxenberg was born on December 27th of 1962 in New York City, and she is the daughter of Princess Elizabeth of Yugoslavia. Her father's name is Howard Oxenberg, and she also has an older sister by 1 year named Catherine Oxenberg, who at the height of her career was a well-known actress in the soap opera Dynasty. There are also half-siblings involved, but for the sake of brevity, we're just going to bring up Catherine. It has long been speculated by the public and by Christina herself publicly that Howard Oxenberg might not actually be her biological father, because her mother, Princess Elizabeth of Yugoslavia, admitted that she had an affair on Howard Oxenberg with a member of the Kennedy family. Christina's mother, the Princess of Yugoslavia, and Jackie Kennedy were closely associated in this time period. The two of them remained close, and according to Christina, she spent a lot of time growing up around the Kennedy family. Whether Christina is a Kennedy or not, it's not really relevant because Christina is technically royal in her own regard. Christina Oxenberg is the cousin of Prince Andrew. She is the cousin of Prince Edward, and she is the cousin of Queen Sofia of Spain. She is also a second cousin once removed of King Charles III. Despite growing up regularly rubbing shoulders and socializing with wealthy socialites and royalty from around the world, Christina mostly lived a very relatively normal life. After she graduated high school, Christina got a job working at a roller rink in New York City and spent much of her late teens and early 20s backpacking around the world. After returning to the United States, Christina got a job working at the popular nightclub Studio 54. Around this time, Christina also got her college degree, and she also landed a job working as a research assistant, which inspired her to write and publish her own book called Taxi in 1986. And it was around this time in the late 80s that Christina would meet and become closely acquainted with Ghislaine Maxwell, who at this time was still very much living life as an heiress to a media empire that her father was actively building. From Christina's recount, it appears that she was closely acquainted with Ghislaine before Ghislaine even met Jeffrey. Christina recalled in her book Trash Encounters with Ghislaine Maxwell a very strange incident that she had with Ghislaine back in 1991, directly after Robert Maxwell had passed away. She called Christina to come over for tea. When Christina arrived, to her shock, Ghislaine Maxwell answered the door in a lacy underwear set, had excessive jewelry on, and was fanning herself with a copy of Vogue magazine. When Christina inquired as to why Ghislaine was undressed, Ghislaine just simply said that it was summertime and it was hot. Christina recalled feeling even more puzzled when she walked inside and saw that there were 3 other women in attendance at this tea party that were fully clothed. Ghislaine was the only one undressed. Now, do you guys remember this dog that we saw in the birthday book being held by likely a victim of Jeffrey? That was Ghislaine's dog, Max. And it was at this specific tea party right after Robert Maxwell passed away that Christina observed Ghislaine violently throw Max, who was a puppy at this time, across the room multiple times and then erupt in laughter. She thought it was hilarious. Christina was shaken up by the incident, but she did remain friends with Ghislaine Maxwell at this time. I think she tried to chalk the situation up to Ghislaine's outrageous behavior being due to grief that she was experiencing. In 1994, Christina Oxenberg was commissioned by Simon & Schuster, the massive publishing house, to write a semi-autobiographical satirical novel called Royal Blue, which is about wealthy Manhattan socialites as well as aristocrats and royals, poking fun at their vanity, privilege, and over-the-top desires. This book was published in 1997 and it garnered positive reviews across the spectrum. Christina appeared on the cover of New York Times and began to gain notoriety in the industry. 1997 is also a year that jumps out to me because in her book that she wrote about her experiences with Ghislaine, Christina recalled that in 1997, Ghislaine sat down with her and had a very strange, creepy, bizarre conversation with her. It was the catalyst for her ending her friendship and relationship with Ghislaine. Ghislaine revealed to Christina that Jeffrey's planes and properties were completely wired with audio and video recording, and Ghislaine bragged and boasted about how they had multiple powerful figures in compromising situations. And again, Ghislaine erupted in laughter. She thought this was hilarious. Ghislaine was very proud of herself. Christina was really disturbed by this, knew she had to distance herself from Ghislaine and Jeffrey. Christina talks a lot about the strange relationship that Ghislaine and Jeffrey had with one another that perhaps contributed to Ghislaine's outrageous behaviors and outbursts. Ghislaine was desperate to marry Jeffrey. She desperately wanted him to marry her, and according to Christina, from an outsider's perspective, observing the two of them, Jeffrey had no intentions to ever marry Ghislaine. Jeffrey saw her as a faithful lapdog and an employee, a reality that Ghislaine was refusing to accept, which may explain the leaked emails from Bloomberg that we saw not too long ago, where Ghislaine was discussing receiving fertility treatment so she could have a baby. She was desperate to tether herself to Jeffrey for her own self-preservation by any means possible. Ghislaine was the furthest from maternal or loving. She would have been a terrible mother. She needed to maintain her value to Jeffrey because of her age. She was discardable if she wasn't an asset. So Ghislaine did whatever she could to please him at the expense of little girls' childhoods, women's dignity, and her own morality. In 2000, Christina paused a project she was working on and went on a hiatus from writing and took a job working at RFK Jr.'s environmental organization, Waterkeeper Alliance. This was back many eons ago when RFK Jr. smiled on stage alongside Democrats, even the Clintons, and was an environmental activist, or at least was pretending to be one. Christina shares that in hindsight, looking back, Ghislaine probably just wanted to cultivate a friendship with her in hopes to grow closer to Prince Andrew and the Kennedy family. Okay, we're gonna wrap all this up by talking about how the NXIVM cult comes into play. We're not gonna go through all of these connections today, but this should help you visualize. So Christina Oxenberg's sister, actress Catherine Oxenberg, has a daughter, Christina's niece, named India Oxenberg. If you watch the documentaries about the NXIUM cult, you probably have heard of India Oxenberg. In fact, I know one of the NXIUM cult documentaries was narrated by India's mother, Catherine Oxenberg. When India was in college in 2010, her and her mother enrolled in a self-help entrepreneurship course hosted by NXIUM. Obviously, at this time, they were unaware of the sinister motivations of this organization led by Keith Raniere, and this course was nothing more than to lure people in. Catherine was not interested in joining NXIUM, but India was, and she dove headfirst into NXIUM for a total of 8 years when she finally got out in 2018. India, like many of the victims of the NXIUM cult, were subjected to a horrific everyday life. They were forced to take nude photographs, they were branded with the cult leader Keith Raniere's initials. Ultimately, they were being procured to be physical partners with the leader, Keith Raniere. But here's where things get really interesting. Two people who were involved in this awful group have one very famous last name. These two people were not involved as victims, they were involved as perpetrators. These are the youngest Bronfman sisters, Sarah and Claire. They are the youngest daughters of Canadian billionaire Edgar Bronfman Sr., who is the heir of the Seagram liquor empire. Edgar Bronfman Jr., Edgar Bronfman Sr.'s son, Sarah and Claire's half-brother, is the former CEO of Warner Music. Not only that, but he is also a contact in Jeffrey and Ghislaine's Black Book. Claire was one of the members, along with their leader, Keith Raniere, who was arrested for their involvement in the NXIVM network, and Sarah was sued for her involvement as well. Okay, so let me explain how NXIVM connects with Jeffrey. I mean, obviously you've seen that this man's son and former CEO of Warner Music is in the Black Book, but it goes so much deeper than that. Jeffrey met Edgar Bronfman Sr. all the way back in the 1970s when he was working at Bear Stearns. They would maintain a very close relationship for multiple decades on. In the years leading up to Jeffrey's arrest, the Bronfman family were one of those families whom Jeffrey was doing this consulting work with. Back in 2000, Edgar Bronfman Sr. attended a NXIVM course led by Keith Raniere with his daughters. This is when NXIVM was really first getting structured and started, and the NXIVM network was being built. I can't think of a better guy to turn to if you're trying to structure and set up an organization, a network, a cult that lures in young women and seeks to strip them of their income, their dignity, and their free will. Can't think of a better person to go to consult with than Jeffrey. He's pretty much a pro at this. I also think it's very interesting that Keith Raniere was arrested in March of 2019, and just a few months later, Jeffrey came tumbling right down the road, also arrested July of 2019. So yes, anyway, there's a lot more connections with Jeffrey and the Bronfman family that we're gonna need to get into. That's the Christina Oxenberg / Bronfman family / Jeffrey / Ghislaine / NXIVM lore in a nutshell. All topics we will likely come back and revisit.